Imagine having a beautiful home and having to flee in the dead of night with only your children and your wife at your side. Imagine being able to take only a few coins sewn into your wife's coat on the inside so that no one would see them, for fear that you'd be murdered because of them. You have to leave behind everything that you own, all your possessions, all your wealth. You're only allowed to take your two most prized horses to carry you out into the middle of the desert, where you set them free, and from then on ride on the back of a camel through the desert to freedom. You've escaped with your life, you have your family, but you're now destitute in a strange land. This terrible escape story was described by my father's cousin in her book, Vartanush, My Grandmother's Story. Vartanush was the oldest child born to Mugardich and Myram Tersagolian. They lived in Erzurum, Armenia, and they fled the Ottoman Turkish Empire after witnessing the Hamidian massacres in the late 1800s. The Sultan Abdul Hamid had attempted to rid the world of all Armenians in 1895 and 96, killing around 500,000 of the Armenian population. A few years later, in the spring of 1915, all of the prominent men that were Armenian were gathered up by the Ottoman Turkish Empire and led from their homes in mass deportations. The remaining Armenian population was taken into internment camps. They were taken to march through the desert to their death. Most of these were defenseless women and children. They were taken and murdered out in the desert because of the terrible rift that had risen between the Turkish Ottoman Empire and the Armenian people. This rift had been palpable for many years. This conflict between these two nations was religiously based. The Ottoman Empire was Muslim and the Armenian people were Christian. In his book titled Ambassador Morgenthau's Story, a personal account of the Armenian genocide, Ambassador Henry Morgenthau tells the story of how the Turkish mentality towards the Armenian people was so terrible. They were described as dogs. One high-ranking government official told Ambassador Morgenthau that all the Christians in the world were swine, especially the Armenians. He said, think of swine. They may all be different. They may be different colors, have different characteristics, but underneath it all, they're all swine. He said it was the same with the Christians. They may be pleasant to look at. However, they were swine. They were seen as filthy and unclean and not worthy to be in the presence of the Ottoman Empire. Because of this prejudice, many Armenians were resentful towards the Turkish people, towards this terrible oppression that they had faced. My father told me a story of the Sabunjan family, his grandmother's family. They owned a soap factory in Erzurum and had Turkish inspectors who would come to their facility. And on one such inspection, the guard that came was especially demanding, and the Sabunjans were not willing to put up with his demands anymore. They pushed him into a vat of soap. Now, these were good, God-fearing Christian people, and I do not believe that they did this for no reason. The Armenians, as I said, are Christians. We are Christian to the core. In fact, Armenia was the first country in the world to declare Christianity as its official religion in 301 AD. Being Christian is something that, as Armenians, we pride ourselves on. We are still a Christian nation. Our faith has withstood torture, murder, massacres, and even genocide. Many Armenians have sacrificed everything that they own, their whole entire lives, for their Christian faith. The Armenian genocide was a way for the Ottoman Turkish Empire to rid the world of the Armenian Christians, these Christian swines, who would not convert to Islam. In 1915, the new government did what Abdul Hamid could not, and they horrifically got rid of 2 million Armenians. They were ridding the world of the Armenian problem, as they referred to it. For years leading up to the genocide, the Turkish government systematically collected all Armenian arms. No one was allowed to have guns or weapons of any kind, any way to defend themselves. Because if they were going to be successful in slaughtering them, they first needed to make the Armenians defenseless. Armenian men who were able to work were sent to camps. Those that were left behind, the young women, young children, and the elderly were marched into the desert. In her book titled The 100-Year Walk, An Armenian Odyssey, Dawn McKean tells of her grandfather Stephen, who witnessed these walks into the desert. He calls them the death marches. People were broke up into camps, and they were marched into the desert with no food, no water, no shelter, and many, many were slaughtered. Camps of 300, maybe 400 people were taken off to the side of the road and massacred. He tells a story of overhearing a Turkish soldier brag about how he had become efficient in murdering young children. If you tie 4 or 5 of them together, he said, you can kill them in one slash of the sword. He also tells of overhearing how a group of 400 young boys were thrown into a cavern and explosives were thrown into the cave. The soldiers then rolled a large boulder in front of the only exit and waited till the screams stopped. Stephen also tells of marching past stretches of the Euphrates River and seeing how the current had changed because the flow of the water had been clogged by the dead corpses that were rotting there. The Armenian problem was systematically and horrifically dealt with. It's sickening to think of. Ambassador Morgenthau recalls that in his book, this Armenian problem was quickly becoming no problem at all. As the Turkish officials had bragged, they were able to do more in 3 months than Abdul Hamid had been able to do in 30 years. Most of the world did not know of the Armenian massacres and genocide that was occurring. There was not a lot of media coverage. Media was not allowed. Ambassador Morgenthau was instrumental in sharing with the world what was going on. Many Armenian people were saved by American missionaries that came to their aid. Lewis Gold teaches us in the Salem Encyclopedia, Armenian Massacres section, he says, to this day, the Turkish government denies the Armenian genocide. In the book titled Turkey and the Armenian Ghost, On the Trail of the Genocide, the authors outline the struggle for the Armenian genocide to be recognized the world over. But it is recognized by those of us who are descendants of the survivors. We remember every day, and every day we live to honor those who have gone before us, who gave so much. Because of this, I was born in a free country. I have the freedom to choose as I will, what I will, and I'm grateful for that each and every day. Thank you.